Pawpaw Chuck here with another childhood story. Today we're going to learn about some young Indian boys and a tradition in the Indian days. Back when the Indians roamed America, Native Americans, they had a tradition. What would happen is when I don't know what they call a female mom, I guess female mom of the Indian family would have a child, they would literally check out what was happening in nature. They were big into nature, and so they would see what was happening, and they would name the child accordingly. And one time there was this running bear that came running by the tribe's camp as the child was being born, and so they named the child Running Bear, and that's kind of how they named kids back then. There was also one where the child was being born, and there was a leaping frog, and so they named the kid Leaping Frog. And so just, names like that, just that's how they name their children. There's another one, some rocks fell, and so they called the kid Falling Rock. And so those are just typical examples of names of Indian children and how they came about. Another tradition with the Indian children was as they grew up and they reached manhood, the male leaders of the tribe would take the young boys out and they would teach them to survive in the wilderness. And they had a bunch of different things they would do. One of which is they would actually blindfold the child and put him on a stump all by himself. And then all the warriors would surround that child with their back to the child. But the child wouldn't know that because he'd be blindfolded. And the child would sit there in the dark and he'd hear animal noises, and it was a scary time. But the child, if he trusted the tribe, would stick it out, and then they would take the blindfold off, and the child would see that the men of the tribe had surrounded him and protected him throughout the night from the danger. And so it was just a way to learn to trust the tribe. Another thing that the young Indian boys had to go through to become a man was to basically survive in the wilderness without the help of anybody, without the help of the tribe, for 3 days. And literally they actually lost some Indian children through this process, but those who made it obviously jumped right into manhood. And there was a time when Running Bear and Leaping Frog and Falling Rock, it was their turn. These three boys were out for this 3-day adventure, and they put them in 3 different places, so they're all on their own. All they had was a knife and a little string to fish with. And so day 1 would go by, and the moms were back, at the tribe, and they would be, praying and hoping their child would survive, and the dad was hoping and praying that the child would survive. And day 2 came by, and day 3. So day 3 is when the warriors went out and found their boys. And so the father of Running Bear found his son down by the creek, and he had made his string into a fishing pole. He got a stick and made the string into a fishing pole, and he'd just been sitting there fishing and eating fish, and was doing pretty good actually. Probably could have survived another day or 2 easily. Leaping Frog was not quite as fortunate. He struggled. He had the knife, and he was trying to catch game, but he went hungry. He didn't eat for 3 days, and you could tell he was starving and he was hungry, but he survived. Unfortunately, Falling Rock, the third child, they couldn't find him. And so the whole tribe got together, and they all started looking, and they looked everywhere, and they actually called in neighboring tribes, and they all looked and looked and looked and couldn't find him. And the tradition says that even today they're still looking for Falling Rock. You'll be driving down the highway and you'll see a sign, "Watch out for Falling Rock," and that's in hopes that maybe you'll find this child. So that's the story of Falling Rock.